These are the top 10 cities where you can still buy a move-in ready house for less than $100,000. These are cities where there's still actually lots of affordability for home buyers, even in the record housing bubble that we are seeing right now. However, before getting into this list, I do have to offer you guys a warning out there, and that's that some of the cities on this list, they're cheap for a reason. Starting with our number 10 cheapest housing market in America, Youngstown, Ohio. Located about a 1-hour drive northwest of Pittsburgh and an hour drive southeast of Cleveland. And home prices in Youngstown, well, they are cheap. So cheap that you'd be able to buy a 3-bed, 2-bath house that's actually pretty nice looking on the inside. It's not bad for $115 grand with an estimated monthly payment of $735. Now, the reason prices in Youngstown are cheap is because it's one of the worst performing housing markets in America over the last 30 years. This is a city that got absolutely crushed by population loss in the second half of the 20th century, with its 542,000 metro population today being about 10% lower than it was in the mid-2000s. However, on the bright side, things do seem to be improving in Youngstown over the last couple years. The pandemic actually brought a lot of remote workers to the area, with the metro registering positive inbound migration over the last 2 years for the first time since 1992. However, our number 9 area where it's cheap to buy a house is not a place that's been struggling for population growth. This part of the country gets plenty and plenty of people moving in, especially over the last year or two. Where am I talking about? That would be the Texas border, particularly the border towns of Brownsville, McAllen, and Rio Grande, where the typical home value ranges anywhere from $75,000 to $170,000, some of the cheapest prices in America. However, those prices actually aren't as cheap as they used to be. In a town like Brownsville, where the typical price is $160,000, values have gone up by an insane 60% since before the pandemic, with one of the main reasons being Elon Musk. He built a space rocket launch facility in Brownsville for SpaceX, which has drawn more jobs and more population growth to the region and pushed prices up. However, the issue for this area in general in the south of Texas, which is going to keep prices from going up by more, is the fact that incomes are very, very low. Median household income in Rio Grande City being a mere $35,000 a year, while it registers $45,000 in Brownsville, $47,000 in McAllen. However, home prices are even cheaper in our number 8 housing market on this list, Peoria, Illinois. In Peoria, you can buy a 3-bed, 2-bath house on the market right now for $90,000. There's even a $5,000 price cut thrown in for a house on nearly a half-acre lot that actually looks okay on the inside. You could live in it. Now, Peoria is cheap for a reason. It's another city that's lost a lot of population over the last 10 to 20 years due to globalization and outsourcing of manufacturing jobs. But interestingly, it actually has a fairly high income level. Its median household income of $65,000 is the highest of any city on this list. A typical home value to income ratio in Peoria, which is about an hour and a half southwest of Chicago, is 2x. The typical value of $135,000 is only 2 times the median income of $66,000, meaning that the typical household would only need 2 years of gross income to buy their house in cash. For comparison, a typical household in LA needs 10 years of income to afford to buy their house in cash. Now, before you get too excited about buying in Peoria, understand that it's in big economic decline. It used to be the world headquarters for Caterpillar, a Fortune 100 company that makes construction equipment, but Caterpillar left in 2017 to move to Deerfield, Ohio, and then left again in 2022 to move to Texas. Now, speaking of Texas, we have another Texas town in our cheapest cities list at number 7. This is a city that I didn't believe actually existed until I accidentally drove through it before I moved to Texas several years ago. Where am I talking about? That would be Texarkana. If you don't know where Texarkana is, I don't blame you, but I'm going to show you right now. It is located right on the Arkansas-Texas border. So half of the metro is in Arkansas, half of it is in Texas, and the typical home price is $149,000. But you can find a lot cheaper than that, with houses like this 2-bed, 1-bath on the market for $83,000, a price that would only require a $518 monthly payment if you purchased with a mortgage at today's interest rates. And what's cool about Texarkana is it's actually one of the few metros on this list that actually registers positive inbound migration and population growth. Every year since 1990, Texarkana has had more people move in than move out. Data from Reventure app showing that in 2021, Texarkana actually hit a record in migration with positive 12,000 net people moving in. Ultimately, this is not a town that probably many of you want to move to. It's kind of just a go-between that a lot of truckers and people moving from state to state drive through. I stopped stopped in Texarkana 3 years ago on my way to moving to Austin, Texas, and ate at an Olive Garden and stayed in a Fairfield Inn and Suites. That's the type of town Texarkana is, and thus its home prices are very affordable. Now, before getting into our number 6 city, I gotta tell you about one of my favorite aspects of the history of the US housing market, everyone. And that's that over the last century, there's been big changes in which cities in America are expensive and which cities are cheap. Like today, we tend to think of the most expensive places as being on the West Coast. States like California and Washington and Utah and Colorado, they have the highest home prices in America today. But that was not the case, say, 100 years ago. In our number 6 cheapest housing market today, Binghamton, New York, was actually one of the most expensive 100 years ago. You can see that in 1930, at the start of the Great Depression, Binghamton had an average home price of $8,200, which is crazy to think about in general, that houses cost $8,000 100 years ago, but that's a different discussion. You can see that price in Binghamton back then was about 15% more expensive than Phoenix, 25% more expensive than Dallas, and 20% more expensive than San Diego. So Binghamton, New York was more expensive than San Diego 100 years ago. It makes me think about which cities in America in the next 50 to 100 years are going to be the most expensive. We're probably going to see some pretty big changes that are hard to imagine right now. For now, Binghamton, which is located in Western New York, is cheap. You can see it here shaded in blue. The typical home value in Binghamton is $158,000. And you're actually able to buy a livable house for even cheaper than that. With this 4-bed, 2-bath listing, 1,800 square feet on the market right now for $115,000 just outside of Binghamton in Johnson City, it does not look too bad. However, again, I don't think many of you are going to be rushing to spend cold winters in upstate New York, especially in a town like Binghamton, which is what I call a minor league baseball town. It's the type of Rust Belt city in the Northeast and Midwest where the biggest attraction that there is in the town is the fact that they have a minor league baseball team. The Binghamton Rumble Ponies, who are the AA affiliate of the New York Mets. Meaning that other than going to see baseball games, there isn't a whole lot to do in Binghamton, meaning that home prices are likely to stay cheap for the foreseeable future. Now, let's keep things moving, everyone. I can't wait to show you our number 1 cheapest housing market in America. You're not going to believe how cheap the prices are in our number 1 market. But first, let's start with our number 5 cheapest market, Albany. And by Albany, I don't mean Albany, New York. I mean Albany, Georgia. Albany is located in the southern part of Georgia, basically in the middle of nowhere, and its typical home price is $146,000. You can see that that typical home price has actually grown a lot in the last 5 or 6 years. However, what do you notice, everyone? Albany, Georgia got hit pretty hard by the last housing downturn. Prices went from $110,000 down to $85,000 over 9 years, suggesting that if you buy into the market today in a house like this, you're not going to see much appreciation for the next decade, especially considering that Albany, Georgia is one of the most crime-infested metros in America. Data from the FBI shows that the violent crime rate in Albany, Georgia is in the 97th percentile of US metros, which is of course not good for home values and could be one of the reasons why its population has declined by 10% over the last 20 years. And so while Albany might not be a great place to buy right now, I think our number 4 housing market could be a good place to buy because it's actually one of the best cities for investors, our number 4 cheapest housing market to buy in America. That city is a little metro called Houma, Louisiana, which is located about 1 hour and 20 minutes southwest of New Orleans. And what makes Houma special is that it has a very high cap rate, 11.5% cap rate, meaning that a real estate investor could buy a property in Houma and get probably around an 11.5% return on their money each year by renting it out. With data from ReVenture showing that that is the highest cap rate available for any metro in America. Of course, prices are cheap and returns are high in Houma, Louisiana for a reason, and that's because the metro has lost population every year going back to 2017, particularly in 2021 and 2022 when Houma got destroyed by Hurricane Ida and lost over 6,000 people in just 1 year. Now folks, are you ready? Our top 3 cheapest housing markets where you can still buy a house for less than $100,000 are upcoming, and they're in a different part of America. They're not so much in the South as they are closer to the Midwest, particularly our number 3 cheapest housing market, Charleston. No, not that Charleston, not Charleston, South Carolina, Charleston, West Virginia. Charleston is the capital of West Virginia and has gotten absolutely devastated by globalization as well as the production of alternative energy sources because Charleston and the rest of West Virginia runs off coal. In fact, 91% of West Virginia's energy comes from coal production. And as a result, the local economy is not doing so great, which is leading to cheaper home prices. For instance, this house is on the market right now, 3-bed, 2-bath, 2,500 square feet. It currently has occupants, it's rented out, and it's on the market for only $99,000, which is amazingly 21% below what it sold for in 2003. With home prices being so cheap in Charleston, West Virginia, that the typical household who makes about $52,000 a year only needs to pay $2.6 times that income to afford the standard house, one of the lowest home value to income ratios in America, which is also the case in our number 2 cheapest housing market, Huntington, West Virginia. You can see right next door, Huntington, West Virginia, which also runs into Ohio and Kentucky, has a value to income ratio of 2.6. And if you zoom out, you can see these cheap, low value to income areas are all in the Midwest and Northeast Rust Belt for the most part, as well as part of the Deep South as well. Now, Huntington, much like Binghamton, is a place that used to be a boom town. It's where the train company CSX used to have their original headquarters. The area being so prosperous as a steel manufacturing and logistics hub in the early 1900s that Huntington was the second city in America to have the electric streetcar after San Francisco. However, things changed fast, with globalization and the decline in manufacturing in America really hurting Huntington's economy, with the result being a nearly 50% decline in population in the city center from 1950 to 2020, which is why you're able to buy a 4-bed, 2-bath house in Huntington for only $107,000 at a $600 a month monthly payment. But really, folks, all the cities on this list so far have been child's play in terms of how cheap they are compared to our number 1 cheapest housing market in America, where not only are prices like less than $100,000, they're way less than $100,000. Why are prices cheap? Well, this town has gotten crushed economically and demographically over the last 15 to 20 years, with its metro population declining from 82,000 in 06 to 75,000 in 2021, according to data from Reventure app. That declining population has made home prices so cheap that the typical home value in the metro is only 1.4 times the median household income, the most affordable city in America for its local home buyers. Where am I talking about, folks? That would be Danville, Illinois, which is located about an hour and a half west of Indianapolis and 3 hours south of Chicago. Danville is so cheap that you can buy a 3-bed, 2-bath, move-in ready house that's actually pretty nice for only $75,000. Like on this listing. 3 beds, 2 baths, 1,400 square feet, $75,000 list price. That's $53 per foot and a $510 monthly payment if you buy with a mortgage for a house that honestly does not look that bad. Now, to be clear, I am not suggesting that you should buy in these cities. I just think it's fascinating that home prices are still so cheap in some parts of America when we're in a record housing bubble. And if you're someone who wants to learn more about the US housing market and the data in this video for your city, I would encourage you, go to the Reventure app, www.reventure.app. This is a program I developed that has home price and demographic data on every city, state, and county in America, and it's free to use. So check it out if you're a home buyer, real estate investor, or data nerd. There's a link in the description.